Qualified immunity. It's a mouthful, right? Sounds like a discount card for mediocre superheroes. But in reality, it's a legal doctrine that protects government officials, including police officers, from being sued for actions they take on the job. Think of it like a legal shield. If an officer violates someone's constitutional rights, but those rights weren't clearly established at the time, the officer can't be held liable. Now, you might be thinking, wait, shouldn't everyone be held accountable for breaking the law? And you'd be right to think that. That's the whole point of a justice system, isn't it? But qualified immunity throws a wrench in that system, creating a loophole that critics argue can let wrongdoing go unpunished. The idea behind qualified immunity is that we don't want to discourage officers from doing their jobs effectively by making them constantly fear lawsuits. It's a balancing act, protecting individual rights while also allowing law enforcement to operate without undue fear of legal repercussions. But the question is, has the pendulum swung too far in favor of protection over accountability? The concept of qualified immunity isn't exactly fresh out of the oven. It's been simmering in the legal world for decades, first emerging in the late 19th century. Back then, it was all about protecting government officials from frivolous lawsuits that could hinder their ability to serve the public. Fast forward to 1967, and qualified immunity got a major upgrade with the Supreme Court case, Pierson v. Ray. The court decided to grant immunity to officials who acted in good faith, meaning they genuinely believed their actions were legal, even if they later turned out to be unconstitutional. This is where things start to get a little murky. How do you define good faith? And who gets to decide if an officer's actions were justified? These are questions that continue to spark heated debate even today. The intention behind qualified immunity was noble, to protect those who serve the public from undue harassment and legal entanglements. But the implementation of this doctrine has been anything but simple, leaving many to question whether it truly serves its intended purpose. So, how does qualified immunity actually play out in the real world? Imagine a situation where a police officer uses excessive force during an arrest. Normally, you'd think the victim could sue the officer, but with qualified immunity, it's not that simple. The victim must prove the officer violated a clearly established right. Finding a case with identical facts is like finding a needle in a haystack. This often shields officers from accountability. Section 4. Key cases and controversies: qualified immunity in action. Over the years, there have been a string of high-profile cases that have thrust qualified immunity into the spotlight, igniting fierce debate and calls for reform. One such case is that of John Thompson, a man who spent 14 years on death row for a murder he didn't commit. Evidence was hidden by prosecutors, violating Thompson's right to a fair trial. After his release, he sued the district attorney's office. But guess what? The prosecutor who withheld the evidence was granted qualified immunity. Another case involved a pregnant woman who was pulled over for speeding. Despite being clearly in distress and needing to get to the hospital, the officers involved refused to let her leave to seek medical attention. The woman sued, but the officers were granted qualified immunity because there wasn't a previous case with nearly identical facts. These cases, and many others like them, highlight the complexities and potential injustices that can arise from qualified immunity. They raise serious concerns about whether the doctrine is truly serving justice or simply shielding those in power from being held accountable for their actions. Section 5. The debate rages on arguments for and against qualified immunity. The debate surrounding qualified immunity strikes at the heart of a just and equitable society. Supporters argue it's crucial for maintaining law and order. They believe it prevents officers from being unfairly punished for split-second decisions. Opponents argue it creates a dangerous double standard and impacts marginalized communities. Section 6. Finding a balance. Navigating the complexities of qualified immunity. The conversation around qualified immunity is far from over. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, requiring a nuanced approach that acknowledges the legitimate concerns of both sides. Finding a solution that balances the need to protect law enforcement officers with the equally important need to hold them accountable for their actions is crucial. Some argue for reforming qualified immunity, making it more difficult for officers to avoid accountability in cases of clear misconduct. Others propose eliminating the doctrine altogether, arguing that it's time for law enforcement to be held to the same legal standards as everyone else. One thing is clear: the status quo is unsustainable. The erosion of public trust in law enforcement is a serious problem, and addressing the issue of qualified immunity is a crucial step towards rebuilding that trust and creating a more just and equitable society for all.